In this video, I'm going to be discussing the sometimes very rare Palmer marking seen on the third phalanx of the Jupiter finger, the basal, the bottom phalange of the index finger. It relates to the much more sort of physical, practical, worldly, environmental, material aspects of all things Jupiter, the way in which we view and exhibit and inhibit thoughts of the self. So it's all about control and domination and authority, ambition, and the way in which the physical relates to those things. So a clearly marked single vertical line here, as I've kind of illustrated here, shows someone who is aligned and well developed in terms of abstaining from too many worldly vices, too many habits pertaining to the body and our physical desires. So this is someone who's going to abstain from um, their own desire and has a very real awareness around their own desire and the need to I suppose, enjoy things in moderation. And they often have a great sense of sort of ethics as well. There's a great sort of alignment in terms of how they carry themselves responsibly, sensibly. You'd likely see a very well developed and positive features around the Saturn finger alongside this marking. Now, sometimes you will see three or more clearly marked vertical lines here, free from defects, isolated, they're not connected to other lines. And this really shows someone who is highly ambitious, someone who is successful and driven in terms of acquiring wealth and assets. Material gain is very important to them, and they will likely have these three or four interests that they are succeeding in gaining wealth and fortune in. However, they are so driven by the need, the desire, the physical acquisition. Wealth is something that's very physical, it's material, practical, it's real. That need, that drive, that desire is possibly something that they're so driven in, they're missing the bigger picture, and they might even be burning themselves out due to overwork. If you've got three businesses on the go, you're never really going to have a rest, and they're kind of working themselves up potentially into an early grave even. And what's the point? The first wealth is health, after all. So there is a danger of that. But essentially, it is a mark of an individual who has tremendous capacity for achieving and succeeding in life. So it is a positive sign. Now, a not so positive sign is three or four wavy vertical lines on the third phalanx of the Jupiter finger, because it shows again that kind of that need, that almost greed, really, that desire for material wealth, but in a way that's more, it's less aligned, it's less true in its course. It's wavy, it's corrupted, it is uh, bent. So it shows a crooked nature in that acquisition of wealth. So it shows the propensity towards cheating, lying, stealing, exploiting, and it's certainly someone. It's not a good sign. A scammer might have this potentially. It should be noted that this is not an outright sign of someone who has committed a crime necessarily, but they have the propensity to be tempted in matters of pursuing wealth unethically, shall we say. Because we should all be judged by our actions, after all. This shows the propensity towards it. This shows that they are tempted towards achieving wealth in a way that is not legal, potentially. And it should be noted that if these lines are very deep and absolutely isolated, then what I'm saying is even more accurate. If they are faint, the temptation is still there, but they are less likely to go ahead with it. There may be other signs in the hand that kind of negate what I'm saying, or in fact enhance it. Palmistry is all about concluding from several signs alone. What I mean is from several signs rather than one sign alone. So several clearly marked diagonal slanted lines that are, they're not vertical, they're not horizontal, they're diagonal. On the third phalanx of Jupiter, it's an odd one. It's a peculiar sign. It shows someone who has acquired wealth in a way that is either through inheritance, or they might have come into money quite suddenly somehow. It shows that success in material gain that is in some way actually working against them. So they probably spend a lot of money to show off. They are indulgent. Their sense of worldly needs and desire is not quite so healthy, but they have wealth at the same time. So they're indulging in what they have, and what they have they've come into quite quickly and suddenly. They are likely big eaters. They love to indulge in the pleasures in life, and so as a result, they are potentially sort of um, weak in terms of their inability to um, say no and turn down those temptations, those vices. It might be someone that feels important because of what they have, because of their wealth and assets, and they like to sort of show off, um, with that, through that, by that. But in some way, that kind of defeats they sort of defeat themselves a little bit. It's a really confusing time because it's both sort of positive and negative. It's it's an oxymoron in a way. So they have something positive, but they are unable to utilize it fully positively, and in some way it works against them. So they might well be um, someone who is being exploited, but it doesn't really matter because they've got plenty of money anyway. It's just someone who seeks flattery and validation and makes other people jealous and envious by what they have, and they surround themselves by with company by company, but it doesn't really help them in any way. They place too much importance on worldly belongings, um, and they are vain. It's important that a person with this sign understands their weakness and surrounds themselves with people that they can trust, and those people, understand this person's weakness and forgives them for it. This kind of forking shaped sign here, it's sort of like a Y, the letter Y. It's a fork. It's a diagonal line with forking at the end. It's a very rare sign, and it shows someone who has these kind of lofty, high ambitions, great grand scale plans, who fails um, to achieve and make anything from them, and loses out. Potentially, they might invest not just money but effort into these grand plans, and they miscalculate, they misjudge, and they end up losing out. It's really important that this sign is noted if it's seen. As I say, it's very rare. To allow them to understand not to place all of their eggs into one basket. They need to be swayed from um, putting too much energy and effort in, and controlling their own urges over these massive ambitions. Um, Essentially, they need self-discipline in managing their ideas, and they need someone around them they can really trust to help guide their urges in terms of where they place their physical energy and money in their plans. Someone with a cross on the third phalanx of Jupiter is rude, crass, swears a lot. They are unhealthy, and they are the source of a lot of people's unhappiness because they are potentially a scammer, someone who is going to cheat and lie and steal. They usually get themselves, a bad name. They are the sort of people who will seduce others, um, and exploit them. This is in a bid to gain something, likely physical. Either something around sex or assets, normally money. You might see it on someone who commits some kind of financial fraud, mate crime, or even sort of poo-poos someone out of their own home. Now, a 5 or 6 pointed star seen on this finger. Now, again, it has to be completely isolated, free from defects to really represent what I'm about to tell you. And thankfully, this is not something that you'll likely ever see. It really describes a person that is extremely immoral, incredibly despicable, someone who is uh, shockingly criminal in every respect, and will do everything to gain for themselves through cheating other people and convincing them, seducing them down these paths that are nothing but immoral. They commit their um, you know horribly unethical acts, and potentially even criminal ones, absolutely shamelessly as well. There's no regret, there's no remorse here. This is not someone who should or could be trusted. Again, you can't judge someone um, by these signs, only by their actions, but it's certainly someone to look out for. And again, you can't conclude or diagnose from one sign alone in the hands. Squares in palmistry are always protective. They safeguard and box things in, they isolate. So they are almost always a positive sign. The need for it is not quite a good thing. The reason why it's there is not always a good thing. But this is generally a positive sign because it protects someone from their own sort of evil doings. It reduces the um, dominating effects, the controlling effects, the negative controlling effects that they have on others, but they do have them, if that makes sense. So they are um, quite sort of respectfully controlling their environment, and normally that's having a positive effect. It can, however, affect others negatively, but the way in which they are acting is safeguarded, I suppose, by this sign, in that they are protected from committing evil acts themselves. Essentially, what they're doing is for, they feel, the greater good, a greater purpose. They're not being controlling and authoritative and dominating out of some, it's not coming from a bad place. It might be frustrating or, oppressive to others in some way in how they're operating, but they are not bad people, and the way in which they uh, present themselves, exhibit themselves, is their kind of more negative tendencies are kept in check. They're kind of boxed off. Circles in palmistry, you just never really see them. This is an extremely rare marking, and it's an extremely positive one. And it's almost as though a person has tremendous ability and no, it's not so much ability. It's more more around ambition and the success they're able to procure around their kind of chosen area of expertise, their purpose. That's it. They have this sense of purpose that is it's going to be fulfilled, and they do it in a quite a pure way. It's really hard to explain this one because it's so unusual. And I've not seen this before in a person's hand. They are constructive and positive in the way in which they work and the effects they have on others and influence others. They are quite inspirational in fulfilling their purpose and their field of expertise, their ambitions. It's like they have an absolute sort of sense of clarity and purity around their purpose and succeeding that. The last sign here, which I'm going to talk about, is the grille, sometimes referred to as the net. And just before I do, I want to kind of reiterate here that all the signs I've mentioned in this video, they have to be clearly marked and free from defects, as in, not these other like little lines kind of connected and touching and stranding off. And it has to be isolated, free from defects, clearly marked. This sign is probably the worst to have on this phalanx. It shows a disturbed, corrupted nature, someone who is highly immoral, um, lacking in any kind of ethics, and it persuades and convinces people around them. It's a sign of a sociopath, really, and maybe a psychopath as well. They are someone who they give in to every single sort of baser desire in the worst possible way and have an extremely negative effect on society as a result, and coerce, convince, and persuade others, and influence others around them to kind of commit these kind of acts in that same way. They're literally the, the worst of the worst. I thought the star might be here, but no, it's this person. Essentially, it's a sign of someone who is mentally unbalanced. Nets grills, they always kind of show an imbalance of hormones, and that's probably what this relates to. And again, the third phalange is very sort of bodily, physical. Um, each phalanx of the fingers represents an aspect of um, the self. Each finger is a pillar of our personality, and Jupiter is much more about control and indulgence, authority and ambition. So the third here, if it's got this grill that shows an inability to control those bodily urges, it's essentially, although I'm painting a picture of someone who is a suspect, they are also a victim because of these urges, and they need guidance, they need help. Wherever you find a suspect, there is at the end of it, at the heart of it, at the beginning of their tale, they are in some way a victim as well, and life just isn't all that black and white. So as a result of this, they, without guidance, will likely fall into criminality in some ways. So, they do likely deserve to be kind of kept at arm's length. But the reason why you probably won't ever really see this, and you might be looking at your hand and saying, "Well, I've got a net, I've got a grill here." Well, you probably haven't. As I say, it needs to be deeply marked and isolated. You might have these kind of baser sort of temptations in a way. Maybe you have these thoughts and feelings, but they're not going to be, you're not going to be this way inclined. Um, if you were, I doubt you'd be watching this video. But, who knows, I could be wrong. And again, it's really important to assess all the areas of the palm and conclude from several signs. And as well, don't look. I mean, there's nothing wrong with looking at your own hand and trying to find out more about yourself. In fact, I encourage that, but don't try to diagnose yourself, because that's a little bit like picking up, or looking on the internet to diagnose medical issues. We're too close to our own situation. Our hands are literally connected, attached to us. So try to not to do that, and seek out a professional, seek out an impartial um, opinion from a professional palmist. So I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. I'm going to do a video on every single phalanx, so check it out. This will be in a playlist of videos with signs and markings on every single phalanx of the fingers. Thanks for watching.